At dinner, my sister stood up and said, "I'm not thankful for freeloaders pretending to be family." Everyone turned to me. I just grinned. And that night, I quietly cut off every bill I'd been covering for her. 1 week later, she was begging for help. You'd think that by 34 I'd be immune to my sister's little power plays. But that Thanksgiving dinner was different. I'd spent the whole morning helping Mom cook like I always do. I even picked up Melanie on the way because her car had been making a weird sound for 2 weeks and she refused to take it in. She said she'd been too busy with work, but I knew she just didn't want to spend the money. When we pulled into the driveway, she was already on her phone complaining about something, probably to that guy she keeps taking back every time he cheats. Inside, everything looked perfect. Mom really outdid herself this year. Candles, gold-trimmed plates, the smell of cinnamon and turkey in the air. You know those magazine-style Thanksgivings people dream about? It was that, at least for the first hour. Dinner started like normal. A few jokes from Dad, some awkward updates from our brother Kyle, Melanie barely looking up from her phone. But then she stood up, real sudden, right as I was reaching for the gravy. She tapped her spoon against her glass. Everyone stopped. It was quiet enough to hear the wind outside. She said she wanted to go around and say what we were thankful for. I don't know why, but my stomach dropped. Something about her smile. She didn't wait for anyone else to speak. Just launched right into it. She said she was thankful for people who actually contribute. People who work hard. People who don't just pretend to be part of the family while living off others. And then came the line that did it. "I'm not thankful for freeloaders pretending to be family." No one breathed. Not even Mom. All eyes turned to me like I was supposed to defend myself against a crime I didn't commit. Or maybe because they knew what she was implying and didn't want to touch it. I just looked back at her and grinned. The kind of grin that tells someone you've already made up your mind. I didn't say a word. Just finished my plate, helped Mom clear the table and drove home in silence. Melanie stayed behind, soaking in the attention. What none of them knew was that while they were still eating dessert, I was on my laptop. I opened my banking app, scrolled through the monthly payments and started canceling them one by one. The rent transferred to Melanie's landlord. Gone. Her phone bill, cut off. Car insurance, cancelled. Streaming services on my account, logged out. That student loan I'd co-signed for and had been secretly paying to help her get her life on track. Done. Even the Uber account she used under my name, logged out, password changed. It took less than 20 minutes to wipe away 3 years of enabling. I didn't send her a message. Didn't make a scene. I just stopped. Let her figure it out. I knew she wouldn't feel it right away. Melanie always lived in a bubble of denial. She never checked what was being paid as long as her phone worked and the lights stayed on. But when that bubble popped, it was going to be loud. And for once, I was going to let it be her problem. 3 days passed in total silence. Not a text, not a call, not even a sarcastic meme from Melanie. I'd been expecting fireworks by morning. Accusations, guilt trips, voice notes starting with, "W if is wrong with you." But instead I got radio silence. It made me wonder if she hadn't even noticed yet. That wouldn't surprise me. She never noticed how much I did. Not when I Venmo'd her landlord every first of the month. Not when her cracked iPhone magically got replaced. Not when her car insurance stayed active even though she hadn't made a payment in 6 months. She thought her life just floated. Like she was charmed or something. Day 4 though, that illusion shattered. The first message came early. I was still in bed scrolling. It was short. "Hey, my phone's off? Did something happen with the bill?" 10 minutes later came the second message, this time through Instagram. "Hey, this is getting weird. My apartment complex left a voicemail saying my rent hasn't come through yet. Can you double check the transfer?" Then silence for a few hours, followed by a voice note around lunch. She was trying to sound casual. Something about her Wi-Fi being down while she was trying to upload a project for her online business course. She mentioned that her Uber app wouldn't log in either and her Hulu wasn't working, and she was wondering if maybe there was some sort of issue on my end. I just sipped my coffee and moved on with my day. By dinner, the texts turned more frantic. Screenshots of failed login attempts. "Can you just explain what's going on?" Then one that made me laugh out loud. "Did you seriously cut me off? WTF is wrong with you?" No reply from me. By the next morning, I had 5 missed calls from her and 2 from Mom. I ignored them all. Then Kyle called. That one I picked up. He said Melanie had shown up at our parents' house in sweatpants and last night's makeup, carrying 2 duffel bags and looking like the world owed her an apology. She claimed someone had hacked her accounts, canceled her bills, and was trying to ruin her life. Kyle said Mom was spiraling, already suggesting I must be going through something, and we should all talk. I told him flat out, I wasn't going through anything. I was done. That night I sat down and wrote everything out. Not for them. For me. Every dollar since 2020. Every lie I believed. Every time I bailed her out while she said I was too uptight, or needed to relax. I didn't cry. I didn't even get angry. I just stared at the list and realized something. I'd been taking care of someone who wouldn't hold the door open for me if I was 2 steps behind. The next day I finally called Mom back. She didn't even say hello. "What's going on with your sister?" I told her. Flat. Every bill. Every fake crisis. Every time I paid instead of saying no. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said we didn't know. And that was the first time I realized how deep it went. They didn't know because they never asked. They didn't want to. As long as things looked calm, they assumed it was fine. I kept the peace and they let me. Well, not anymore. That weekend, Melanie posted a story with some dramatic quote about being betrayed by the people you trust most. I didn't respond. Neither did anyone else. She burned through what little savings she had in about 5 days. I knew she would. She was scrambling now, hopping between friends' apartments, posting not-so-subtle cries for help on social media, pretending it was all temporary. But for the first time it wasn't my problem. And for the first time I was starting to feel like my life, finally, was mine. Melanie didn't hit rock bottom all at once. She found it the way she lived, recklessly, loudly, and with zero awareness until it was too late. The first clue that things were really unraveling came when she showed up at one of her old friends' apartments without notice. Stayed 2 nights. Ate their food. Used their shampoo. Left a coffee mug with half-melted ice cream on the windowsill and vanished. The friend messaged me on Facebook. "I know you guys are close. Is she okay?" I stared at the message for a full minute before replying. "She's figuring things out. She'll be fine." I didn't offer to pick her up. Didn't ask where she went next. I logged off. It was getting easier to do that. To disconnect. The old me would have dropped everything, driven across the city and offered her my couch again. But the old me was gone. Something had clicked that night at Thanksgiving and it hadn't clicked back since. I started changing in other ways too. Slowly at first. I didn't tell anyone. I canceled the gym membership I never used and signed up at a smaller studio near my office. The kind of place with wooden floors and people who didn't wear makeup to sweat. On a whim I bought a pair of roller skates. I hadn't skated since college but I used to love it. Melanie once said I looked ridiculous in them, so I'd stuffed them in a closet and forgot they existed. Now I skated down the park path by my apartment twice a week, headphones in, eyes ahead. Every time my phone buzzed with her name I let it go to voicemail. The voicemails got longer. First she was confused, then annoyed, then scared. She said she was crashing with friends but couldn't keep doing that. That her bank account had overdrafted again. That she applied for 3 jobs but hadn't heard back. That she was literally starving. I knew she wasn't starving. She was scared. For the first time she was staring at her own consequences with no one to block them. She said, "I know you're mad but I really need help right now." I didn't delete the voicemail but I didn't call back either. I was busy learning how to help without fixing. That's what my therapist called it when I finally sat down and told her everything. She said I'd built an identity around solving other people's problems. That when I stopped it felt like I wasn't doing enough, even though it was exactly what I needed to do to survive. She said something I haven't forgotten. When you stop catching her she might finally learn how to land. So I stopped catching her. I watched her fall and I sat with the guilt and it faded. Because behind it was something else I hadn't felt in a long time. Relief. I stopped checking her social media. I muted the group chat with my family. I cleaned my apartment the way I liked it, with the music I liked and no one sitting on my couch complaining about how this place feels like a hotel. I had my space back. I had my time back. I was remembering things I used to enjoy. I signed up for a pottery class, started cooking instead of ordering in. I even blocked her number for a few days just to see how it felt. It felt like freedom. But I wasn't heartless. Just tired. And as tired as I was, I knew this was only the beginning, not just for me but for her. Because she was on her own now. And whether she liked it or not, the life she used to avoid, the growing up, the responsibility, the choices, was finally catching up. And this time there was no one left to blame. 2.5 weeks after I pulled the plug, I got the call I knew was coming. It was my mom. She didn't even try to hide the frustration in her voice. Said Melanie had shown up on their doorstep without warning, dragging a busted duffel bag and 3 shopping bags that clearly weren't hers. She hadn't showered. She hadn't called ahead. She just arrived as if the world owed her a soft landing. I asked, "Where's Dad?" "Sleeping," she said. "But not really. He's pretending to so he doesn't have to get involved." That sounded about right. He wanted to know what I thought they should do. If they should cover Melanie's rent just this month. Maybe help her find a job, or if I had any ideas. I said, "You do what you want. But I'm out. Don't drag me back in." She was quiet for a second, then she said, "You really meant it, huh?" I told her I did. And I hung up. I could have left it at that but I didn't. A few days later I drove over. I didn't tell anyone I was coming. I just needed to see it for myself. What a version of Melanie looked like when the handouts stopped and the reality started to sink in. She was in the guest room, curled up under a blanket on top of the covers, scrolling through her phone like she was trying to will it to ring. She didn't even hear me come in. The room was a mess. 2 plates of half-eaten food on the dresser, a suitcase barely zipped, clothes spilling onto the floor. It smelled like cheap perfume and dry shampoo. I stood in the doorway for a while. Eventually she looked up. She didn't glare. Didn't roll her eyes. Just blinked. You came. I nodded. Yeah. I did. She sat up, rubbed her face, pulled her knees to her chest. She looked smaller than usual. Not physically, just quieter. Like something had been turned off inside her. She said, I didn't know how much you were actually doing. Not until everything stopped. I didn't say anything. I let her talk. She told me about losing her job, how they cut her hours because she was late too often, how she missed 2 shifts in a row when she couldn't get a ride, and how she hadn't even called in because she didn't want to deal with the drama. She talked about the friend who let her stay for a few nights, then ghosted her after Melanie left the place trashed. About the time she spent at the library using the Wi-Fi just to apply for jobs and how she never thought she'd be that person. She wasn't crying. She wasn't angry. Just tired. I finally said, I'm not giving you money, Mel. Not now, not later. That part of our relationship is over. She nodded. I told her if she really wanted to fix things, she'd have to do it herself. Budget. Stability. I said I'd listen if she wanted to talk, but I wouldn't pick up the pieces anymore. That I wouldn't call landlords or send emergency transfers or beg people to give her another chance. She said okay. And I believed her. That was the surprising part. There was no fight in her this time. No sass. No deflection. Just quiet, exhausted honesty. I went downstairs and talked to my parents after that. That part went differently. They were on the couch watching the news on mute like they were hoping if they ignored things long enough they'd go away. I asked them what their plan was now that she was here. Mom said they didn't want to make things worse. I said you already did. They both looked at me. I told them the truth, that they'd enabled her by standing back while I handled everything, and that now, the second she had to face her own life, they were thinking about padding it again. I said they didn't get to play the concerned parents now that she had no one else left. Mom looked away. Dad said, what do you want us to do, just kick her out? I said no. I want you to treat her like an adult. Give her rules. Give her a deadline. Make her contribute. And if she doesn't, then yeah, maybe you do tell her to leave. They didn't like that. But I wasn't there to make them feel better. I left that night feeling heavier than I expected. I didn't want revenge anymore. I didn't even want to be right. I just wanted peace. And maybe the hope that Melanie would finally grow up. Not for me, not for our parents, but for herself. And weirdly, I think she was starting to want that too. She had no one left to save her. But maybe that was the thing that would finally save her. By week 4, the transformation had started. Not loudly. Not with some dramatic gesture or tearful apology. But with Melanie taking the bus to a part-time job at a small coffee shop 15 minutes from our parents' house. It wasn't glamorous, and it definitely wasn't a comeback story anyone would write home about. But for her, it was the first real thing she'd done on her own in a long time. I didn't hear it from her. Kyle sent me a blurry photo, clearly snapped from across the street. She was behind the counter, hair tied up, name tag on, wiping down the espresso machine. Caption: guess who actually clocked in today? I stared at the photo longer than I meant to. I didn't feel proud. I didn't feel vindicated. What I felt was something else. A strange, quiet relief, like something inside me had been holding its breath for years and finally exhaled. She hadn't called. Hadn't asked for anything. I didn't call her either. Mom filled in some gaps. Said Melanie had been coming home tired, shoes in her hands, heels blistered, not saying much. She was making her own meals. Cheap pasta, frozen veggies, lots of canned tuna. Said she wasn't watching TV, just reading at night. Something about budgeting. Mom didn't know the title. I did. It was one of the books I gave her 2 years ago that she'd once used to prop up a broken table leg. He's different, Mom said one night over the phone. It's weird. I didn't answer. Because weird or not, it was happening. Then one Saturday afternoon I ran into her by accident. I was picking up groceries after the gym, hair still wet, earbuds in, half focused. I turned down the frozen aisle and there she was. Hoodie, name tag, basket full of frozen pizzas, face bare and pale but calm. We both froze. Then she blinked first. Hey. Her voice wasn't embarrassed. Just plain. Normal. Hey. We stood there like strangers for a second. Then I asked how she was doing. Still broke. Still working. Haven't missed a shift. There was something oddly steady about her when she said it. Like even though everything was fragile, she wasn't pretending anymore. No bragging. No guilt tripping. No manipulation in her tone. She told me she'd started setting alarms every morning so she didn't miss the bus. That she packed her lunch now and made instant coffee at home to save money. She said she downloaded a budgeting app, opened her own checking account and stopped going out, not just because she was broke but because she didn't want to be around the same people anymore. I didn't say much, just nodded and listened. Then she looked at me and said, I really screwed things up, didn't I? I didn't have a clever response. I didn't need one. Yeah, but you're starting to fix it. She didn't cry. Neither did I. It was just quiet. And for the first time in years we talked like people, not like the fixer and the disaster. Just sisters. After that we exchanged texts occasionally. Nothing heavy, just updates. She sent me a photo of a meal she cooked. Something barely edible but homemade. I sent her a link to a free online course for certifications in customer service. She didn't ask for help. She just said thanks. The shift was subtle but huge. She was still living at our parents' house but she had rules now. My dad, of all people, finally stepped up and said she had 6 weeks to save and get out. Mom didn't argue. They weren't giving her cash or covering anything for her. She was paying for her own food, her phone plan, even doing her own laundry, which she'd never done without calling me in a panic over shrinking everything. And honestly, she was managing. Clumsily, slowly, but she was doing it. I went over for dinner one night, just to see how things were. Melanie opened the door, hair damp from a shower, in slippers and sweatpants. She looked tired but not miserable. You want tea or something? I blinked. It was the first time she'd offered me anything since we were kids. Sure, I said. Over dinner my parents made small talk. Melanie didn't interrupt once. When my mom brought up a new coworker who was annoying her, Melanie didn't roll her eyes or take over the conversation. She just listened. She was even the one who did the dishes without being asked. I stayed behind when the table was cleared. It was just the two of us in the kitchen. She leaned against the counter and said, I know I burned everything down. But, weirdly, I think I needed to. I just nodded. Then she said something I'll never forget. You always tried to save me. I thought you were controlling me. But when you stopped, when you really let go, that's when I realized how lost I was. I swallowed hard. That hit deep. Because it wasn't just about her. Letting go of her forced me to find myself again too. I told her I'm still here. Just not to fix everything. But I'm here. She smiled. Small, honest. The kind that actually felt real. That night driving home I realized we weren't back to what we used to be. And that was a good thing. Because now, whatever we were becoming, it was going to be built on truth. Not dependency. Not guilt. Not silent resentment. But something closer to what being sisters is supposed to feel like. By the end of the 6th week, Melanie had moved out of our parents' house and into a tiny studio apartment above a hardware store. It was old, the ceiling had water stains and the place smelled faintly like paint and dust. But it was hers. She paid for it with her own money, saved from tips and shifts she didn't skip, and she didn't ask anyone to help her move. Kyle helped her anyway. He said she only had 4 boxes, 2 trash bags of clothes, and a microwave she found on Craigslist for $15. She didn't tell me she'd moved. I found out through Mom, who casually mentioned it like it wasn't a big deal. I waited a few days before texting. So, you finally escaped. Melanie replied within minutes. Yeah. Landlord gave me a discount because I didn't ask dumb questions. It's ugly but quiet. Kind of perfect. A month ago she would have framed it as a sob story. This time it was a punchline. And I loved that. I visited the apartment 2 weeks later. She invited me over for tea and I was so curious to see it I didn't even hesitate. The building was exactly how she described. Old, a little crooked but solid. Her place was upstairs, one room with a futon in the corner, a folding table as a desk, and a candle burning on the windowsill that smelled like vanilla and determination. She handed me a mug chipped at the rim filled with oversteeped chamomile. Don't judge the presentation. I smirked. No judgment. We sat on the floor. No couch, no TV, just a speaker playing low music and the hum of traffic outside. She told me she'd been accepted into a 6-month online certification program. Said she'd saved enough to pay the first 2 installments herself, and she wanted to eventually work in project management or operations. Something boring but stable, in her words. She said she liked the feeling of being able to say no to things. No to toxic friends. No to weird men. No to overspending. And especially no to calling me in a panic. I told her I was proud of her. And I meant it. She looked down at her tea and said, you know, I don't miss who I was. But I really miss who we used to be. Before all the crap. I thought about that for a second. Then said maybe this is who we're supposed to be now. We sat there for a long time in that silence. The good kind. No tension. No weight. Just sisters finally on equal ground. It wasn't perfect. She still had bad days. I still had moments where I questioned whether I should have done more or less. Our parents still didn't talk about any of it. They kind of acted like everything magically fixed itself like they always do. But that no longer mattered. Because Melanie and I had something we hadn't had in years. Clarity. Not love built on guilt or obligation, but something real. She didn't need my money anymore. She didn't need saving. And I didn't need to be her safety net to be her sister. Now when we talk, it's about books, shows, the weird customers she gets, the meal she messed up but still ate. We joke, we vent, we hang up without awkwardness. The bond is there, not because she needs me but because she wants me around. That's what makes it different. That's what makes it finally feel like home. The big update. About 2 months after Melanie moved into her new place, I got a text from her out of nowhere that just said, "I have something to tell you. Don't freak out." I stared at it for a while, half expecting something dramatic. My brain went straight to the worst-case scenarios. She lost her job, she was moving again, she got back with one of her exes, or somehow managed to blow through all her savings in one night. I wrote back, "That message never leads to anything normal. Fill it." She asked if I could come over that night. Said it wasn't bad, just kind of big. When I got to her place, I knew right away something was different. There were new curtains in the window. A real table with 2 chairs. A potted plant on the floor. Alive, shockingly. She even had a second mug that didn't have a chip in it. She looked nervous. But also happy. We sat down and she took a deep breath. "So, I met someone." I blinked. My stomach tightened just slightly. Before I could ask, she rushed in. "Not like that. I mean, yeah, it's a guy, but he's not like the others. He's not even my type, like, at all. He works in IT. He wears khakis. But he listens. He's calm. He makes his own meals and reads before bed. And I didn't tell you because I didn't want it to mess anything up." I let that sink in. She wasn't glowing. She wasn't trying to impress me. She was grounded. I asked how they met. She said he came into the coffee shop 3 times before she even noticed him, always ordering the same thing, never talking much. Then one day she spilled a latte on the counter, cursed under her breath, and he laughed. Said it was the most honest customer interaction he'd had all week. They talked. Then they kept talking. "What's the surprise?" I asked. She got up, went to her tiny fridge and pulled out a piece of paper stuck with a magnet. It was a course registration confirmation. She'd signed up for night classes at the local community college. "I'm doing it," she said. "Officially. I start next month." She smiled, but not the old smug smile. This one had something behind it. I asked if this guy had anything to do with it. "A little," she said. "But mostly it's me. I finally want something more than just getting by." I sat there for a moment and realized something I hadn't let myself believe until that second. He was changing. Not pretending to. Not performing it for attention. Actually, quietly, steadily, becoming someone new. And this time the surprise wasn't a disaster I had to clean up. There's something good. Something hers.